Good morning. My name is Mike Lawrence. I'm lead pastor here at Faith Community Church, one church, two campuses, Framingham and Hopkinton. We're in a series on what happy couples know. You know, God wants you to have a happy marriage. I believe that. I mean, what's the alternative, right? God has called you to that, and we're having so much fun with this series. We're encouraging people to go on a date, whether it's with your spouse, your significant other, gather a group of friends and just go out and have a great time. And we post it and hashtag it Faith Night Out. Tuesday night, Sheila and I went to the best barbecue joint in all of Massachusetts, BT Smokehouse. Corporate sponsorship was not supplied, all right? We had a great time. Fried chicken, first Tuesday of the month. Fried chicken. Woo, baby. And that was my sweet spot, my happy place. That's what my smiles for being with my wife and having fried chicken. Just saying. All right? So just hashtag us and let us know. You know, when I was single, I spent most of my time looking for somebody who would be perfect for me. Right? Isn't that how we kind of approach our relationship? You're looking for someone who would be perfect for you. I wasn't thinking about being perfect for someone else. I was thinking about who would be perfect for me. Because what do I have? In my life, I've accumulated hopes, dreams, ambitions. And I was looking for someone who would help me to fulfill those. I wasn't necessarily thinking about how I could help them with their box, because to be honest, I don't know that I even thought they had a box. I had a box, right? It never occurred to me they might have a box. And that in their box would be their own hopes, dreams, and ambitions. And sometimes when we approach marriage, we don't even think to talk about the other person's box, because we got a box, right? When we get married, what happens? We get a new box, our box. Now, sometimes we think, I'll just put my box into our box and we'll be happy, right? Guys are dumb, all right? I'm just saying that. And I speak on behalf of all men everywhere, okay? Sometimes we think we can negotiate. I get one, you get one, right? That's kind of fair. It's like kids on a playground, right? You pick one, boom, boom, boom. Or sometimes, you know, maybe your wife is like, you get one, I get one, you get two, I get one, two. You get number three, I get 1, 2, 3, right? I mean, that's how we approach things. That worked right. It worked for you? Okay, good. Because the thing is, you can't put both of boxes into the new box. It doesn't fit. We talked about that last week. This is part 2 of last week's message, which is okay if you weren't here last week. You'll be able to pick up and carry on, and I would encourage you to download the church app and look at last week's message, because we talked a lot about this style of marriage when we approach it, and we're trying to figure out what to do about our marriages with our boxes. We talked about what I call contract marriages. A contract marriage is based on negotiation, right? And a lot of it is built around compromise, which is not a bad skill. We all need to learn to compromise. But when you're living with compromise, what are you looking for? Where things are broken, where the negotiation falls down, where the other person owes you, right? And when you approach a contract marriage, the idea of like, what's the least amount I have to give for the most that I get back? And sometimes we approach that with things like chores, right? So you're thinking about, I shovel the driveway while you're on the business trip. That means you get to do the laundry. It's contract negotiation. I gave out on your behalf. Now you have to give back on my behalf. Or maybe it's money. Great, you bought a new purse. That means Friday I'm going to get a new tablet. You spent, I get to spend. And that's what we're thinking about. And you notice the operative pronoun is typically I, me, my, mine, about our box. Which, if you hear that, those pronouns don't work together like that in our box. Because we even bring that into infractions. What do you do when you're in a contract relationship with a person and they don't fulfill part of their contract? You hold them to account for it. They have to fill the gap. They have to make up for the deficit. They have to pay for what they didn't do. And when we bring that into a contract marriage and we're thinking about it, she snapped at me in front of the kids. She volunteered me to coach. She complains about me visiting my parents. You know what that means? I'm going to watch football all day Sunday. That's what I get for what she took from me. Or sometimes, you know, he didn't pick up the dry clean. He forgot to get the oil change. He watched sports all last weekend. I'm going out with the girls, and I don't want to hear about it. Put the baby to bed, and you're on your own. You compromised the contract. I have to receive recompense for that. And that's how a contract marriage tends to work. But I want to look at things differently. Last week we talked about the idea of an unconditional love marriage. I introduced that. I want to unpackage that. This week we're going to really take apart a passage. I'm not necessarily going to go from the beginning of it and go all the way down. I'm going to look at the parts of this passage about marriage. That's a famous passage. All right? And as we unpackage this together, we're going to have to climb into the first world in which it was presented. Because we have to hear it the way the first church heard it to truly understand what the leader is trying to say about marriage. So I'm going to talk Greek today. I'm going to share a passage. In this passage, I'm really going to upset some of you. So get ready for that. That's okay. I've learned in my lifetime I upset just about everybody over something. And that's okay, right? So I'm going to upset some of you today. And then I'm going to tell you how Sheila trusts my cooking. Okay? I'm going to put all that together into a message. And to do that, I need your help, God. So, God, I'm coming to you today. This is not about me, about my skills, about my life, about anything. This is about Jesus Christ today. And that's what I want front and center. I want people to walk from this place having heard about a remarkable God whose love is so profound, so life-altering, so different, that it's astounding. I mean those words because when I look at you, Jesus, those are the words I think of when I think of you. You set the tone of love, and I want that to be communicated today, and I want it to wash into our households so we might stand out as lights in the midst of darkness. Would you bring your presence and your healing power into this room? Because, God, there are people here who are struggling in their marriages and need help. There are people in this room that are lonely because they don't have a relationship. And God, there are people in here with great marriages. And just looking for some guidance. Lord, only you can speak to this type of diversity. So I'm praying for the supernatural outpouring of your Holy Spirit in a message this morning, which is greater than me. In the name of Jesus, I pray. Amen. So we said last week this material is built off of curriculum from North Point, Andy Stanley. Just wanted to thank him for that. I want to talk about this idea of unconditional love. It's based off of Jesus Christ. Take a look at the last night before Jesus died on a cross. He's gathered with a group of friends. They're celebrating a very intimate holiday. It's called Passover. And so Jesus has them all gathered around together. And what he says to them is, a new command I give to you. Love one another. Well, that's not a new command. What makes it new is when Jesus says, as I have loved you, so you must love one another. That makes the command new. All right? By this, everyone will know you're disciples if you love one another. If you love one another, implied, like I love you. In other words, people are going to know that you follow me by the way that you love one another, because that type of love is going to be so different, they're going to ask the question, where does that come from? Where did you learn this from? How can you do this? And Jesus is saying, you just tell them about me. Because it's the type of love. Now, you got to put statements into context, because you got to understand when it was said, where it was said, why it was said, and all of a sudden I go, whoa, that's different. Jesus said all this at the conclusion of a very extraordinary event that the Pope practices. Really. Because it starts the night off with this party. All these people have gathered together in the Mediterranean world. Your feet are stinky because you're wearing sandals and it's a hot climate and they're all dirty. And the first thing you do at a party is you have the lowest level servant clean people's feet. The Pope does that at Easter, right? And Jesus does it. Now here's what's remarkable. Jesus chooses. He is the center of the party. He's the host of the party. He's the most important person in the room. And yet when he sees the need that is present before him, he takes the job of the lowliest servant. And he washes their feet. It actually makes them feel uncomfortable when he does it. And you know when he washes, you know who's there? Judas is there. At this meal is Judas, a man who is already orchestrating a betrayal that's going to lead to his execution, and Jesus washes his feet. Who else is there? Peter. Peter's a man that Jesus knows he's going to stand up. He's one of these guys who, like, he speaks before he thinks, and he's just like, I'll never abandon you. I'll never betray you. And Jesus, of course you're going to do that, Peter. You're going to do it before the sun comes up tomorrow. He washes Peter's feet. He washes everybody's feet. Because Jesus puts love into action. And when he says, as I have loved you, so must you love one another. And the most prominent memory in their mind is going to be the foot washing. Jesus is like, I want you to put this type of love into action in your relationships. I want you to serve the basic needs of the people around you, even if it's embarrassing. Right? Because loving people who don't love you takes a depth and commitment of love that's extraordinary, that draws the attention of the world around. It's a counter-cultural love. Doing what you know is best for someone, even if they're not going to provide the same consideration. This is not contract love. Contract love would have been wash, wash, wash. Judas. Wash, wash, wash. Peter. Wash, wash. That's contract love. But Jesus is an unconditional love, which washes everybody's feet. And it's this type of love that he says, I want you to put into action. And I'll tell you something, from this point on, and everything you read in our Bible that follows after the 4 stories of Jesus, whenever they reference the love of Jesus Christ, they're thinking of this type of love. All right? Whenever they talk about love, they're thinking about that type of love. Whenever they call one another to love each other, they're thinking of that type of love, the type of love that would get on the knees and wash the feet of a man who's about to betray you, to be crucified. I'm like, okay, this is the type of love that needs to really build into our relationships. Now, if you're a good church leader, like the Apostle Paul was a really good church leader, you're going to want to help people in very practical ways. And so we have a number of his letters. This is extraordinary, right? 2,000 years old, and we still have the letters that were written by the Apostle Paul are in our Bible. And in the instructions, Paul would get so practical. He'd say, okay, this is the type of love. All right. This is how you do it at home. So this is what we're going to look at. We take a look at how you practice this type of love at home. It comes out of a letter written to a church in an ancient city called Ephesus. Right? That's why we call it the book of Ephesians. It's not a big mysterious name. It was just today, if we were doing it, and as a church leader, it'd be the church to the people of New York City, or the church to Bostonians. Hey, how you doing? My name's Paul, right? Smart pack, pocket car, and then come into church, right? It's just where he names it. And then in the midst of this, you know that he didn't write English, he wrote Greek. And so sometimes you really have to get into some ancient languages to make sure you accurately understand what's being said. And you have to put it into context to accurately understand what's being said. And I want to keep this in mind because as we talk about this, it's really important that we understand both what Paul was saying, but how he was saying it and to whom he was saying it. Because here's the thing. And I agree totally with Andy Stanley on this. What I'm about to read upsets Americans in ways that didn't upset the first church. And doesn't upset us in ways that did upset the first church. We've kind of got it a little reversed. So I'm hoping to unpackage it just so you can see that a little bit. And I'm going to bring us all the way back earlier in this letter, because in this letter, Paul's moving into a section where he wants us to understand how to live out God's will. He says, therefore, don't be foolish, but understand what the will of the Lord is, and don't get drunk with wine, for that's debauchery, but be filled with the Spirit. So this is an ancient technique. You would repeat something, right? And you'd rephrase it slightly different because you're trying to make a point. And what he's saying is, on the negative side, he's like, look, don't be foolish. Don't go off and get drunk and all that. That's what being foolish would be like, right? But you want to be wise. That's the alternative. If you really want to live by God's will, if you want to be filled with the Spirit. And he's going to give us a series of instructions on how to do that. So he's really saying to his church, what he's saying is like, guys, if you don't want to be foolish in life, but you want to be wise, you want to live by God's will, you want to be filled with the Spirit, then I'm going to give you some advice on what to do. And he's really practical. What the first thing he says is like, I want you to go worship together on a regular basis. That's why we do this. Right? Because Paul says, if you really want to know God's will, if you really want to be filled with the Spirit, then worship together. Great. And then he also says this, as a matter of fact, give thanks under all circumstances. See how practical he is? Like, I know how tough life can be. I'm writing this letter from a prison, and all I'm saying is like, don't make your relationship with God based on your circumstances. Give thanks unto all circumstances. Oh, okay. And then he gives you a third bit of advice, and this was really hard. Submit to one another out of reverence for Christ. Just to guide all of your relationships. Submit to one another out of reverence for Christ. And the question then becomes, well, what does he mean by that? What he means by that is like, look, don't submit out of someone because of who they are, because you have to, because you think they're better than you, or you don't have a choice in that. Do that because you want to be like Jesus. Remember the one who washed people's feet? Remember the one who shared an intimate meal with Judas, the one that he asked Peter to pray, though Peter was going to betray him? This is what he's saying. He's like, look, I want you to treat one another with a mutual submission inspired by Jesus Christ. Everybody, including the home. I want you to practice this type of relationship in the home. Now, I want to say something about what the homes are like so you really get it, okay? Because in Paul's world, it was completely different than in the American world. In Paul's world, the man was the head of the household, legally. I mean, that's how the state looked at him. He was the one who made all the contracts. He was the one who owned all the property. He was the one who owned all the wealth. He was the one who had all the power in her marriage. As a matter of fact, he could literally say, I'm done. And the woman was out. She had no choice, no recourse in any of this. And she'd be on her own, trying to figure out life. And the state was like, okay, that's fine. He was in charge of the kids. The kids are his ultimate responsibility, but they're more like an investment into his future, than they were like in American society, where we really invest in our next generation. And he had slaves. The slaves were just a natural part of the first century world, and every household had them. Like in, they might have had, if you ever watched Downton Abbey, they had servants, they had slaves, right? Now, Paul couldn't change that. That's the way the world was. And Paul had to figure out, how do we live as Christians in a world with things that we can't change? We're not going to change that structure of life. What Paul is saying now in the midst of all this is, if this is the way it is, how do we live it? How can we mutually submit to one another out of reverence for Christ? And when he applies it to his family, he goes into this letter and he says, okay, so that means wives submit, children obey, and slaves obey. And everyone in the room would have said, yeah. It's just how it is. Not necessarily revolutionary, Paul. Every woman would have known. I have to submit to my husband. Every kid would have known. Of course I have to obey my parents. Every slave would have known. I have no choice but to obey. Paul is not justifying slavery, because I understand this passage did that in our history. Paul is not justifying oppressive parenting. I know that people have used this passage to be abusive to their kids. Paul is not justifying a domineering spouse that even lends into abuse. And I know that people have used this passage to justify that. Paul's not justifying any of those things. He's dealing with the situation as it is. He's about to say something that is revolutionary, but we got the wrong application of the passage. We're like, Paul is justifying slavery. He's justifying child abuse. He's justifying spousal abuse. No, he's not. Matter of fact, Paul has introduced an idea into the world that is a seed that will take root and revolutionize human civilization. And I don't say that lightly. But he knows the seed's going to take a long time to take root and to bear fruit. And in the meantime, he's got to deal with the situation as it is. That seed is this little verse that changed the world when people really started to take it seriously. There is neither no Jew or Greek, slave or free, male or female, we're all one in Christ Jesus. He is saying there is no racial superiority, there's no gender superiority, there's no superiority of one person over another. That when you choose to follow Jesus Christ, Jesus creates equality. Humans create inequality. Jesus leads us to equality. That's huge. That idea would change the world. I understand that there have been points in the history where the church has justified slavery, right? You understand it was Christians that dismantled slavery in Europe and in America. because they finally took this seriously. Isn't it a shame it took centuries for that to happen? But Paul introduced this idea. This is why I think every woman should follow Christ, because Christ brings equality. So we bring the message of the gospel to the world around us, not for imperialism and pushing our cultural values, but because Christ brings equality. That is the goal. That is the goal of the faith. And so now Paul is going to take this concept and he's actually going to address it in a way that I think made men upset. Right? Because when he talks to men, look at what he says. Husbands, love your wives as Christ loved the church and gave himself up for her. Hear this. And we just talked about this. Jesus says, love one another how? As I have loved you. Paul's like, husband, love your wives. How? As Christ has loved you. Because you're part of the church. Now, do you know what that means? It means he gave himself up for her. You know what? All of a sudden, he looks at the men who are in power, have all the legal rights whatsoever, totally in control, and he's like, awesome, give it up. Because that's what Jesus did. Jesus, who is the most powerful individual, Jesus who had all the authority, Jesus had all the rights, surrendered everything for you to be saved. Now, men, use your power like that. In a world where he couldn't change the structures, he told men to suddenly take on the image of Jesus Christ and to be servants completely. It's not about what's in your box now, is it? When you approach a marriage like that. I mean, he goes on, he gets really practical. Look what he says. In the same way, husbands should love their wives as their own bodies. He who loves his wife loves himself. No one ever hated his own flesh, but nourishes and cherishes it just as Christ does the church. And suddenly to men of a household for which women were, part of the household, which had total control, he's like, cherish her. What the head of the household felt was deserved respect. You cherish me, because I'm the one who provides for your needs. And he's like, let's flip this around a little bit. You take care of her basic needs, right? You provide her food, you provide her water, you provide her shelter, but it goes beyond that. Because you start to cherish somebody, you're really starting to make an investment into them, aren't you? You're working hard for them. You're investing into them. You're providing time and attention and love and energy. It comes down to, what are you willing to sacrifice when you cherish somebody? He's changing things. He's changing this world. And the men would have had a problem with this statement. Because it's not the way the world had trained them up. Paul is flipping things around. For Paul, it's not about a power. It's not about authority. It's about being like Jesus and loving one another. We change everything by seeking power and authority. For Paul, it's like, whatever power you get is to be flipped around to serve those who don't have it. And starting by looking in your own household. He said, therefore a man shall leave his father and mother and hold fast to his wife, and the two have become first flesh. One flesh. You know what he's saying to men? You got to disconnect from your prior home. Your wife, this can be hard. Don't throw things at me. I'm going to stand behind this. Men, love your wife more than your mom. That's hard. Make your wife your first priority. This is your first relationship. This is not your primary relationship. Elevate it to that position. And this starts to change the world around him. Because even back then in a patriarchal society, the oldest father that was still alive is the one that's in charge. And he's like, you guys got to disconnect. And you got to invest into this marriage, and you got to build a solid marriage where first priority is now your spouse. That's hard. It doesn't mean you ignore your other family of origin or whatever. It's just you start to flip in your mind your priorities. And he goes on, he says, so again I say, each man must love his wife as he loves himself, and the wife must respect her husband. So in the midst of all of this, you can hear something. He's using words that are interchangeable. I believe that. Because of course, What he wants is he wants the wife to love the husband. He wants the husband to respect the wife. Right? Of course he wants that. He uses words to try to elaborate what he's trying to say because it's such a different concept for them. That's what speakers do. That's what teachers do. We use words in different ways, and we add on to the words to try to drive a point home. And in the midst of all this, he's like, guys, because the overarching principle to the household under all circumstances is mutual submission out of reverence for Christ. So love one another and respect each other. Mutually submit to one another, which is super counter in culture no matter what century you live in. Now, I get it. This is a thing in the church. And so we have this statement that we wrestle through. When Paul says, the husband is the head of the wife, and Christ, as Christ is the head of the church, his body, of which he's the Savior. And you know what we've done for a long time with this passage? We say, okay, that tells us who's in charge. That tells us who's in control. That tells us you have to define a word in the context in which it's used to truly understand it. And in the context all around this, it's all about sacrifice and surrender. You know what it means to be the head? It means to take responsibility for the body. That's what it means. When we get into questions of like who's in charge around here, we're missing the point. It's not about power, it's about surrender. It's not about authority, it's about serving. That's what it's all about. You know, when Paul's talking about this, because what did he just say right after this? He goes, just after this from saying about this headship concept, he goes right into talking about Jesus sacrificing everything. There are other places where he talks about Christ is in charge. In this context, he's talking about Jesus Christ gave up everything to love the church. Now, men, give up everything to love your wife. He's banging that point home because for men that would be hard to hear. In today's world, he'd be banging home to women the same thing about women. Love your husband. Give up everything for him like he's giving up everything for you. That's what it comes down and comes around to. You know what it means about the box? The box is no longer about, this is my box. Help me get my stuff into our box. You know what it becomes? Let me see your box. How can I help you get the things that are really important to you into this box? Not my box is priority. Let me see your box. Let's take a look at your hopes. Let's take a look at your dreams. Let's take a look at your ambitions. How can I help you sort through this box to get it into our box? It doesn't mean you just take their box and dump everything into our box, because that's not always good. It's not always practical, right? I mean, if my wife wanted to have a singing career with her husband, she'd be sorely disappointed. That's never getting into our box. I just can't do that. Sometimes our boxes have expectations that are unreasonable. And so as we go through those boxes, that's the mutual submission out of reverence for Christ. Like, I would love to fulfill that expectation, but I don't have musical talent to save my life. And in loving me back, Sheila would say, that's okay. I don't need to put that into our box. I can leave that out of the box. And you start to look at the box like this. You know, the habits, the finances, the work, all of this. It's the idea. It becomes, it becomes things that's like, you know what I would love to do? I would love to stay home with the kids. Okay. How do we do that? What does that mean financially? And what does that mean about, we're not going to be able to do those vacations that are also in the box if we do that, because we're not going to have enough money to do that. Well, then maybe we need to leave the fancy vacation out of our box so that we can put into our box me staying at home. Great. Well, we both want to work. We both feel we're skilled and we have a calling to go into that box. Awesome. How do we do that? Because that means now, we're going to have to figure out about the kids, right? So how are we going to talk through our boxes to make this full of our dreams, our hopes, and our ambitions? It means some of our stuff isn't going to get in there. But I'm dedicated to trying to get your stuff in there, because I want to see us build our box together. In our household, I love education. Sheila she got her education. She was happy to be done. And that was, she was like, she had other pursuits in life. But in my box was further education, master's degree, doctorate degree. So, there was a point when we were first married where for Sheila, it was like, look we can put off having kids while you get your master's degree. And as a matter of fact, she said, I'll be the primary breadwinner of bringing an income in, because you can't do all full-time work and do full-time school. I'm not going to try to push that on you. That wouldn't be, we're at a place in our life where we don't have kids and we can do it this way. She allowed me to put into our box our education, and she kept out of her box having children right away. Okay, isn't that wonderful? Then, when I was like, well, the master's was awesome. I'd love to have this doctor of ministry. And she's like, okay, let's think about how we get that into our box. As we talked it through together, for Sheila, it was like, look, let's do it now while the kids are young. All right, and I'll carry a little extra weight while the kids are young. I'll do that because I really think, what, God gave me a husband who loves education. I want to help you fulfill that dream. She did not think the day will come when I get what I want. That's a contract. It was just, how can I help you fulfill this dream? In the flip, now you know what that creates? You know what it created in me? How can I help you get stuff into our box? You're so loving and so devoted to getting stuff from my box into our box. What's in your box that I can help get into this box? And so for a while, it was like, Sheila was like, I just want to be at home and raise the kids. Like, awesome. So I'll work hard and we'll cut back on our budget and we won't do some fancy vacations because this is important for you to be in this box, and I support that. Then when it turned around, she's like, I'd love to work. The kids are older. It's like, all right, then how do we get that in our box? In that box, that means I need to take on some more chores, some extra things I haven't been doing recently. And I need to step it up, and I need to do these things because you no longer have the time if we're going to pursue this together. We started looking at each other's box and trying to figure out how do we get it in there. Because the point is you don't go through my box fighting over how to get it into our box. You say, let me go through your box to see how we can get it into our box. And if we're both devoted to that, then we're seeking the best for each other to get into this box together. It's how we made decisions throughout life, right? Who's in charge is the wrong question. Mutual submission out of reverence for Christ, which means love each other as equals because we follow Jesus as Lord. That's what it means. So over the lifetime, as you're in this even came down to decision making. There'd be times you feel like, you know what? The kids are sick and we need to change everything and take care of them. I didn't know that. She was in tune with our kids. Physically, she was right on spot. And I was looking at that and I'm like, she is better skilled to make that decision than I am. I'm an awesome cook, say so myself. And I can look at a recipe and she'll look and says, I don't think that'll taste good. I'm like, trust me, it will. We just start to yield things. These are silly examples, right? We start to yield even sometimes decision making to the person who is better equipped to make that decision than me. And you know what? I'm okay with that. And if someone looks at me and they're like, well, what happens when you don't agree? Well, then we need to talk some more. And we need to pray some more. If it isn't a position where I'm ready to yield that over yet, or she's not ready to yield that, then it's saying, that's a sign that we haven't really talked this through carefully, that we haven't prayed about this carefully. Because if we're going to submit to one another, if we're going to love each other as equals as we seek to follow Christ as our Lord, the God that's in charge, then we need to pray through this some more. And I get that it's not easy if your spouse doesn't necessarily follow your faith. This is why we really push this in premarital. People who say it doesn't matter if we don't share the same faith, we'll figure it out. It absolutely matters. Absolutely matters. You don't want somebody going into a marriage for an unconditional love marriage and someone coming in under a contract marriage. So we press really hard. You need to think about your sharing the same faith because that's going to change your marriage and the way you parent. Now, if you're in a position, it's like, okay, but we're married and we don't share. All right. Okay. This is from experience. This type of love has a way of transforming people. Even when your spouse doesn't believe the same as you, it can still transform your marriage. If you truly commit to this, if you sacrifice for it and you make it happen, because Jesus is your Lord and you're choosing to follow him, you can transform a marriage by loving somebody like this. we get something really important that Pastor George is going to lead us into that's going to remind us that the love of Jesus Christ is at the core. We want to send you home with a couple of questions. You don't have to talk to your spouse about this. But here's 2 questions for you this week to really think about. When's the last time someone admired the way you love your spouse? If you're loving them like Jesus Christ, the world should know. When's the last time someone looked at you and admired the way you love your spouse? That's saying that they're seeing the love of Jesus in your marriage. And what is an unfulfilled hope, dream, or ambition that you can help your spouse achieve? What has been in their box for a long time? Maybe they stuffed it into the closet, so to say. How can you pull that box out and say, hey, what's that hope, that dream, that ambition that's really been important to you? How can we get it into our box? Don't ask them. See if you can figure it out. God, we just come to you with our marriages and our relationships, our friendships, Lord. And we just pray because, God, this is the type of love that infiltrates every single relationship. May you revive us by focusing us on Jesus, who loved us in a way we couldn't imagine possible. May that love fill us and influence all our relationships.